discuss the long-term strategy for Boson, as recently published by Justin in his Masterplan Part 3 document. So just introduce myself. My name's Matt. I lead strategy at Boson. I work on partner development. I work on marketing strategy and I guess more broadly speaking, our go-to-market strategy. Worked in the space for about 6 years, but with a number of different Web3 projects. Boson, of course, of which is the most exciting. So that's myself. Mischa, why don't you give an intro to the community today?
Hi, I'm Mischa. I've been building stuff with blockchains since about 2017. I've been here for 2 years and head up the engineering team. I love thinking about product and tech.
Brilliant, thanks. And Justin, of course, the man, the legend, the myth.
Justin Banon, co-founder here at Boson.
Great. So we're going to give a short sort of presentation. We've got a couple of slides and some insights into some of the things behind the master plan. But I will also just say there is going to be a Q&A session at the end. So if you do have any questions, we have been requesting them in Telegram and Twitter over the last few days, and we have got a list of stuff which we're going to sort of go over. There has been a competition. Someone will be a lucky winner of some Boson tokens. But we also have the Q&A tab here in Crowdcast, and Oliver is looking on LinkedIn Live. So just post a comment, post a question. We'll try and get to it. There are quite a few, but we're going to do a rapid fire Q&A session at the end. So thanks everyone. If you're not sure where that is, if you're on desktop, if you scroll over to the right hand side, there's a little question mark button, and we can handle it from there. So I think I'm just going to just do a very brief intro and then hand over to Justin. So this is quite a momentous time for Boson. We've all been working quite hard over the last 2 or 3 years, and this is sort of the reason we published the third version of our master plan is because we have come to a pivotal moment where a lot of the foundational work has been done. So maybe Justin, if you could kind of give a bit of background to that, and then we'll sort of get into the sort of elements of the strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as we put right up front in the master plan, we've now completed the build. Basically, what we set out to build in version 1 and version 2 of the white paper. And so basically, this is like the decentralized commerce infrastructure for the Web3 economy. So that comprises this kind of core decentralized commerce protocol and a whole suite of dApps, which are kind of putting Web3 dApps, which sit on top of that protocol. And so that is, as Matt said, it's like kind of a momentous time for Boson to have gone from what originally was kind of a concept, not even a design, through design to build of this sort of infrastructure, and to have received all the accolades that we have, is a huge achievement for the team and the project and the whole community. So yeah, just well done everyone that's contributed to that. And perhaps Mischa, you could just sort of talk us through really what these two elements are, and just high level how they're kind of constructed and what they mean, the core decentralized commerce protocol and the d-commerce dApp suite.
Yeah, sure. So like you said, you guys had this vision of kind of trustless commerce on the internet, something which is permissionless, decentralized, trust minimized. And when I first joined, after we first shipped version 1, we learned lots of lessons, and then came the design of the core V2 protocol, as we call it now. So now we've shipped and built and tested a protocol which allows anyone to sell anything off-chain and sell it for an on-chain token. So this is a trust minimized exchange protocol for the exchange of off-chain goods with on-chain goods. And We've been iterating on it. We shipped the first version of Boson V2 in November. We've been using the Diamond standard, which is this modular, upgradable standard for writing Solidity smart contracts. And we're now at a place where we can achieve what we believe is trust minimized, permissionless exchange. So we've had a whole stream of work there with some great people, shipping Solidity code, shipping the smart contract layer. And then the next, which I find very exciting, the next phase is now trying to build a set of suites, a set of applications which enable e-commerce on the web on top of this protocol. And we started that journey by building a dApp initially. So this was a single page web app which allowed sellers to come, put up their wares, put up offers, and allow buyers to come and connect with their wallets and buy these physical goods as redeemable NFTs. And this dApp suite, again, we were super excited by this. It was great work across the board in the company, in the team, where we allowed for a back-endless experience. Like us as an entity didn't have to facilitate these transactions. These were sellers selling to buyers directly. And now the current phase is turning that dApp into a set of widgets which anyone can use. So stepping out of our dApp and making this infrastructure available to anyone on any website on the web, on the internet. Yeah, I think that's where we're at. I guess right now the focus is around these Web 2 bridges, or Web 2.5 bridges, as we're looking at it. So the current bit of work we're doing is we're trying to remove friction. Sellers have asked us if there's any way to open up the front of the funnel. So we're integrating, there's been leaps and bounds in UX of on-ramps. We're putting in an on-ramp, we're adding in token swaps. We're adding in custodial wallets so that people who don't have a wallet can sign up with an email address and interact with the protocol and buy stuff available on the protocol. And all of these things, like I said right before, are making their way into our suite of widgets so that anyone can use this work on their own domain if they want to sell stuff on the internet.
Yeah, and I think, you know, that sort of next step that we're doing on top of these two layers is really all about enabling real Web3, because there's a huge amount of like this kind of what we call Web3 washing, like, yeah, here's an NFT, you can redeem, here's an NFT, it's redeemable for a physical, but you've got to trust me. And what happens if that person disappears? You get a rug pull, right? So Boson enables this real Web3 commerce. But now or next, it's real Web3 with Web2 UX. And that, feedback we've had from brands is the real kind of requirement, right? So we've got this authentic Web3, exchange mechanism, but it's super easy for mainstream brands and their users to use it without having complex token swaps, and you can easily buy the tokens they need. They don't even need to use MetaMask to be able to access real Web3. Yeah. So what's after that, Max?
So one of the very good. So I think one of the key things that we've been thinking about strategically at Boson is how do we make this Web3 commerce infrastructure available everywhere? Like one of our recent sort of campaigns that we've sort of looking at, and many of you I think joined some of our briefing sessions, and that was this idea of sell everywhere, embed everywhere, and this idea of kind of, we're not building a dApp, we're not building a marketplace, we're not trying to build OpenSea physicals. What we're actually trying to build is a sort of fundamental piece of commerce infrastructure that can work anywhere, right? And I think as you see, the work that Mischa's just been talking about in terms of how we're building the dApp to be sort of modular, to be sort of embeddable in many different areas to sort of delivers that. But also there is a sort of like a kind of a non-linear growth lever that we're trying to pull on, which is how do we build connectors into mass adoption, right? And so things like our WooCommerce project at the moment, things like connecting Boson sales natively into something like OpenSea, opens the door to that kind of exponential growth through plugging into user behaviors that currently exist and enable them to have a great UX, but using Web3 native Rails. So we're going to come onto those in a little bit more detail in a minute, but we're actively working with and building on WooCommerce, which is the largest e-commerce content management system, broadly speaking, in the world. Something more than a third of all e-commerce websites are using that. And then, in terms of our kind of our digital or our digital and physicals proposition, obviously OpenSea is the largest and most established marketplace. We're working on how we can natively enable things like sales at a basic level, but also price discovery and redemptions through OpenSea. We'll talk about those a bit more in a minute.
Brilliant. So, I mean, the next thing we sort of address in the master plan is just reminding everyone what is our mission. And I think in some ways, perhaps through the different phases of Boson, there was a point where we had our metaverse commerce widget launched on V1, etc., and we did a lot in the metaverse, and there was that whole zeitgeist. And maybe people kind of thought, oh, okay, they're a metaverse sort of commerce widget app. But those of you who've been around a little longer know that's just one small app on top of what Boson is. Boson, the aim of Boson is to be like the TCP/IP of commerce, is to be this single layer within Web3 that's like the clearing rails for commerce. That's we've always had our sights firmly on this sort of multi-trillion-dollar opportunity to become this decentralized layer upon which the future of commerce will run. And in the last couple of sort of bull markets, we didn't have the product ready. I mean, I know like the last one, we did loads of stuff, but it was mainly Mischa and Ludo and team hacking stuff together to enable us to launch these clients, etc. And so, it was a struggle. We weren't at that time scalable. Now we are. And so we're looking forward to this next bull market. That's why we're kind of busily assembling all of these kind of like bridges to mainstream and Web 2.5 bridges. Because when this current crypto winter ends and we get the next bull run, we will be product complete and ready to onboard and service mass adoption. And that's really what we're kind of rushing to get complete within the next couple of months, so that this time we can really kind of ride that next wave of adoption. And so then in the master plan, excuse me, we then touch a bit more on our purpose as well, which back in the early days was very forefront, and just it's good to remind a lot of the new Bosonauts as well that we are not. I mean, you see a lot of this sort of Web3 commerce here. Sell a pair of sneakers with an NFT and call it Web3. That's not sort of Boson. Our purpose is to shift from this current trajectory where commerce is like owned by so many monopolies and so many of these extractionary organizations. And like take Amazon, for example, eating bigger and bigger slices of not just commerce, but the whole economy. They're kind of going after logistics and FedEx. They're competing with sellers, basically just eating everything they can. We are a community-owned, neutral piece of technology that aims to create a level playing field where you can have thousands of e-commerce millionaires rather than just a couple of e-commerce or trillionaires. And we've always had this conviction that if Web3 is going to become a thing, and if the Web3 economy happens, you will have to have proper trust minimized decentralized commerce. You will need to be able to exchange physical value and physical assets in the same way that you can exchange monetary value. Now, if I transfer, a Bitcoin to Mischa, he has all of these kind of properties where, once he receives it, I can't rescind it. No one else can censor it. He's got strong and credible claims enforced by cryptography that he has that value. And the same should be the case if I transfer a pair of age inappropriate D&G sneakers to him, And with Boson, because we know he'd wear them, with Boson, we have, that's what we're enabling. And if the Web3 economy is going to become a thing, then you will have to have proper trust minimized decentralized commerce. And that's what Boson is. Matt.
I think sort of connecting to that, I'm just going to bring this up. Sort of one of the diagrams we've been working on. Within that broad sweep of ambition, I think one thing for everyone to bear in mind is that, we sit within a macro environment that is by turns incredibly exuberant and incredibly pessimistic. And Justin's talking about those sort of cycles that we've had over the last little while. We saw quite a lot of, I guess, kind of progress and engagement in the sort of like early part of 21 when we did our initial white paper, and we did our crowd raise. I think we also were very fortunate at that time to have been to sort of got the peak of exuberance around the emergence of sort of Web3 and sort of Web3 application technology at that time. I mean, since then, there have been ups and there have been downs, and there's been a lot of downs over 22 that continue. I think the thing to bear in mind here, though, is the sort of like the real progress that's going on behind the scenes. Huge numbers of people, both in the direct team but also in the sort of extended team, have been putting huge amounts of strategic and practical and engineering effort into building something that is now very, very practical and very there. We talked at the beginning around sort of communicating the vision, making sure that people understood where we were going, and then sort of, providing air cover essentially, that we have to then use that that Google and that sentiment to sort of spend a couple of years building this. We are now there, and we do have a very performant set of decentralized commerce tools for brands and for creators, for sellers, more broadly speaking. And there are some great adoption stats that I think we've been talking about around there. I think we've had 60, nearly 70 sellers live. We've got 20 projects currently running using Boson protocol right now. And then this sort of, this kind of like this channel, this connection and adoption strategy that we're in the process of deploying will increase that even further, we hope. So so Boson's sort of fundamental value is quite sort of decoupled from sort of macro sentiment and markets and things like that. It's just one thing to bear in mind. Where were we going next? I've lost my thread. Yes. So, Justin, do you want to talk about sort of completing V2 and sort of what the sort of the program of Web3 economy and that side of things?
So, we talked up front about how we've completed these two big milestones. The first one being the protocol, the second one being all this whole dApp suites. And so the protocol itself, which we launched, the V2 of last year, received lots of praise, from, for example, Professor Jason Potts, one of the world's top blockchain economists, as being the sort of technology infrastructure that can create this whole new type of what we call programmable or computable economy. So an economy that is not just digital, but it's smart. You know, you can program to say, okay, I'm only going to send Mischa this amount of value if Manchester United win the FA Cup and he does this, and you know, all of these different conditions and computability, and this being this fundamental upgrade of the economy. We also received World Economic Forum Technology Pioneer status as a technology that can transform commerce globally. And as I mentioned in the master plan, those of you who know my politics know I'm very quite opposed to things like globalization and stuff like that. But nevertheless, it's it's a huge endorsement for us. It's opened many doors to lots of channels to big organizations. So that foundational layer of Boson is a massive technology breakthrough. And what we're finding now, as we're sort of part of this new zeitgeist of real world assets, is actually the vast majority of these real world asset protocols that are out there have not solved this fair exchange problem in a crypto economic, kind of properly trust minimized way. What they're doing is saying, okay, we're going to have a trusted custodian who's going to issue you a token. You trust them. It's just like banks, issuing checks. So even now, Boson is kind of, leading in terms of the level of sophistication of real world asset tokenization and exchange. And I think we've always been, I would say we probably started this thing 3 or 4 years too early, but we are, this time when the wave of adoption comes, we're going to be kind of product ready and ready to sort of onboard it. Matt.
Yeah, I was just going to sort of touch on some of that sort of underlying adoption that we've had sort of over the course of the past couple of years. When we launched V1, we kind of we had some great sort of reference partners, really sort of who are innovating and experimenting with us. Creators who've been working with us the whole way through, really now, like Ouroboros and that sort of thing. I think where we sort of first came on this sort of connectors of mass adoption strategy was really riding that metaverse wave during 21 and 22, and with say Metaverse Fashion Week last year, we kind of had a whole bunch of people really kind of engaging with Boson as a technology. We had Tommy Hilfiger, we had Cider, we had Asian, we had a whole bunch of, I think we had like 15, 20 in like a fashion district, that was sort of, again, sort of surfing a zeitgeist, I guess, which is great for sort of narrative and storytelling, and also enabled us to sort of build the product at that point. Price, but the price of the token peaked sort of during the bull market 21, but we sort of have got that fully functional sort of metaverse product suite working now during 22, and we've got a sort of like a much more modular, flexible approach that enables people to embed these kind of Web3 commerce point of sale into anywhere in Decentraland. We're also running, I think, 4 brands inside our Boson Boulevard in Decentraland right now. And I think, it's just interesting that sort of value is sort of decoupled from the progress and sort of like tied to market sentiment more than anything else. In our current what you might call our DApp, we've got about 20 brands live right now. Many of them using the technology to sort of present a sort of a Web3 store, either on the bosonapp.io or indeed on their own on their own website, or on a sort of standalone site which the Boson service enables. So the progress is sort of independent in a way of underlying sentiment. And one of the things we've been doing behind the scenes has been really focused around reaching out to all these sort of target ideal customer profiles, right? Who could benefit from Web3 commerce. So digital creators, Web3 natives, luxury and fashion brands still very much in the space. If you look at Adidas and Crocs and all of these guys who have been doing stuff over the last few weeks, we're in regular contact with that community as well. And so that kind of being primed and ready to go is really the sort of like the name of the game for us right now. What do you think about sort of those cycles of boom and bust, Justin, and that kind of underlying sort of adoption curve sort of idea?
So, the fact of the matter is, there is a chance that the Web3 economy never happens, and technology goes along a different path. I don't believe that. I wouldn't be here if I did, and I know most people in this space, have a strong conviction that Web3 is the next version of the internet. And what we've seen is that technology happens in these booms and busts. And I recently had an article published in CoinDesk talking about how 25, 30 years ago there was a very famous New York Times article that pronounced the internet dead. And of course, what happened is we had like 30 years of continuous growth ever since that. And I think what we're going to see, what we've seen thus far with Web3 is the laying down of infrastructure, which is going to form the foundations of the next economy. Like in the same way that we laid down the infrastructure of things like, protocols like TCP for data transfer, with the web. If you look at DeFi, DeFi is enabling a financial system that doesn't require trust. But it's been transacting magic internet money thus far, right? NFTs enable digital ownership and scarcity, but they've been transacting expensive JPEGs thus far, right? Both of those are really, really important niche categories, but that technology is now mature. And I think this next bull run, what we're about to see is the real world coming over to run on those rails. And so real world assets is a massive part of that. We are kind of unique in that we're doing real world asset tokenization and exchange for kind of commerce assets, essentially. But this, bringing the trillions of dollars worth of commerce and finance, real world commerce and finance onto blockchain rails is the multi-trillion-dollar opportunity. As Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, said, moving forward, all these kind of markets are and all assets are going to operate in a tokenized way. And so I think, what we're gearing up for, in my view, across Web3 is the merging of these new technologies and the trillions of dollars of real world assets. And so that's something that we are, heavily involved in. And, I think this is going to be, the beginning of an actual Web3 economy, right? The merging of Web3 and the real world economy. Yeah. Perhaps I sort of, yeah.
Can I just add something to that? I think just to roll back just over 10 years now, that when the first Bitcoin transaction happened, that was the first time on the internet that something wasn't copyable, right? That was strong, verifiable claim for the transfer of a Bitcoin. I think what Justin's talking about and what we're seeing with real world assets is loads of trusted intermediaries are coming now and going, hey, trust me, I'm going to ship you a real world asset, whether that's real estate or whether that's, tokenized gold. And there's been efforts to minimize the layers of trust by being transparent, you can see there were diamond trails, putting the provenance of these diamonds on chain and linking to the hashes, IPFS hashes. But really, what Boson allows you to do is to have strong, verifiable forward contracts or vouchers or IOUs. And if you look at all of the real world asset tokenization, it's all a matter of someone going, hey, trust me, I'm going to tokenize this class of asset. With Boson protocol, anyone can use it to go, hey, hey, don't trust me, trust my skin in the game, trust the way that I've configured this offer, this product. And if it doesn't work, you can get your money back through dispute resolution, through it being through the protocol mechanics. So it is very exciting. And for the first time, we'll start seeing, now with this next wave, I hope we'll start seeing more things other than just fungible things and JPEGs being kind of traded in this trust minimized way.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so, you know, whilst we are, you know, at this kind of momentous point, and we've completed the decentralized commerce protocol, we've completed the suite of dApps. You know, our aim is really installing Boson as this single layer upon which commerce runs in a Web3 economy. And that's why we're building these Web2 bridges, we're building the custodial wallets, website integrations. But our aim isn't really to just you know, pick up individual sellers. Our aim is to plug into these sort of scaled distribution channels. So yeah, to sort of plug into the existing infrastructure. And I mean, this is a very similar sort of strategy to one that, you know, I employed while I sort of headed up in my previous role. I headed up for about 10 years. You know, I worked for a kind of $1 billion like digital voucher platform, if you like. And the strategy there was, rather than picking up individual clients, to pick up those scaled distribution channels. And in that case, it was MasterCard, Visa, and they all had banks and they all had thousands of customers. And that's what we're doing with these big e-commerce players like WooCommerce. And of course, we're talking to the others. I mean, we have a kind of principle of not discussing partnerships until they're launched, or till they're announced, type thing. But then also, you know, plugging into OpenSea on one side, which is a scale distribution channel for buyers, plugging into WooCommerce on the other side, scale distribution channel for sellers. That's where we're going to get exponential growth, right? Not just going and picking up individuals. So, I mean, guys, what's your sort of perspective on that and the strategy there?
I mean, I think we've kind of been very mindful of that for the last couple of years. I mean, when we were working on our metaverse strategy in 21, 22, you know, that was very much the point of view. And, you know, we were looking at things like Decentraland, and we still have a, you know, strong and ongoing relationship with the Decentraland team and with the Decentraland community. And we were looking at, you know, things like Unity and, you know, Unreal Engine as being routes there. I think one of the challenges that we have with adoption there is that, like, the open metaverses, if you like, are kind of, you know, relatively, you know, depopulated, and the closed metaverses are where the activity is, and they're not yet ready. And I think that's sort of one of the reasons why I think the WooCommerce product is so exciting, because they're very, very sympathetic to open source. You know, they're very, very sympathetic to sort of enabling that. And in fact, you know, WooCommerce as a product, you know, is sort of locked open in a way, in the same way that sort of like, you know, Web3 is natively. So I think it's a really strong way forward there. And I think, you know, OpenSea and what they're doing now around their new redeemable standard and how we can plug into that, I think is also very interesting too.
Another thing, as Justin talks about this, going for scaled adoption, right? So being a protocol whose objective function really is to facilitate good exchanges, right? So, you know, the protocols wants for there to be successful exchanges between buyers and sellers. We're aligned with buyers who want to get their goods, and we're aligned with sellers who want to sell stuff. Unlike NFT marketplaces whose business models are about eyeballs and attention. So when we're going out and speaking to these distribution channels, we're not a business. Well, we're not a project who's going, look, we want everyone to come to our nftmarketplace.com and we want people to just scroll through our NFT marketplace. What we're trying to do is enable sellers to get closer to their buyers, to be able to target in ways which they haven't been able to do. And we're not vying for their attention in the same way as these brands are vying for buyers' attention. Sellers want buyers to be on their site, not to be on an NFT marketplace. And I think the strategy which we're taking now, where we're focusing on enabling e-commerce and enabling this exchange to happen on any domain on the web, and us not vying for the user's attentions, kind of positions us really well versus people who are building NFT marketplaces or kind of trusted intermediaries for real world assets, because ultimately you need to trust them, right? Their business is for people to trust them to be the promise of shipping a real world asset. And I think that puts us in a very unique position.
I think, and this is sort of typical in terms of innovation cycles, right? Like what you see at the beginning, existing approaches with ad hoc adaptations, right? So you can be very sort of neckbeardy about intermediaries, right? And I think a lot of crypto is around that. But essentially, trust is provided by somebody an organization who stands behind their customer service, right? And I think this idea of sort of decentralized exchange with a custodian is like a very easy sort of next step to take. I think where a lot of the promise of our industry and our space, this sort of socio-cultural change, I suppose, comes in is what Chris Dixon at A16Z was calling sort of strong technologies, right? So where this idea of like progressive sort of digitization of the economy is being expressed through decentralized networks, right? And what we've got now coming up is I think one of these sort of Boson represents strong technology through this idea of commercial exchange of digital things, but also physical things, sort of enabled by these new types of computer network.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Just a bit conscious of time, guys. I mean, we had a little bit of a deep dive into the WooCommerce and the OpenSea. I think maybe we could just quickly touch on that. And I just want to make sure we have 15, 20 minutes to get through what now seems like 30 plus questions. So
yeah, we're going to try and answer lots of questions, aren't we? So yeah.
So I'll just quickly jump into sort of WooCommerce and why WooCommerce. One, I sort of talked about this sort of like open source sort of nature. I think the sort of like the one that's sort of most exciting to us in a way is that they are the biggest, right? They have a 38% market share of all e-commerce stores, right? So when we when we launch in the marketplace with the pilot product and then the follow-on products that we've got, we're accessing literally millions and millions of online stores, many of whom are interested and the team behind WooCommerce Automatic are very forward thinking. They have a dedicated Web3 team. They're looking at integrating sort of like high volume partners, people like new payment systems and things like that, Ramp and MoonPay and all those kind of guys, and also innovative partners like us where enable them to test new markets. So we're very much looking forward to that and believe that's going to be quite important for our road to adoption. Oh, is that going to go away? There we are. Mischa, do you want to just touch on a couple of the key points around OpenSea as well before we go to the questions?
Yeah, so OpenSea is currently, I guess, or what has one of the biggest audiences. They're talking about redeemable NFTs now, and the ability to do primary drops for these redeemable NFTs. I guess where we're at is we're looking at how obviously these are trusted. There's no money lockup. There's no strong assurances by a protocol underneath to ensure that if the buyer buys a redeemable NFT that the seller delivers. So what we're looking at is how can because we use NFTs, these are redeemable NFTs, they're just 721s. We're just making sure that it would be possible for sellers to create these redeemable NFTs and these offers for these products and to drop them on OpenSea, but have the buyers still have these assurances from the protocol. So that's where we are. I think the key, that's what we're building towards. Where we are right now is exposing the ability for sellers to create drops on OpenSea. Yeah, I think we'll be integrating with them, and as a result, should be able to integrate with most of the NFT marketplaces out there.
Great. I think we'll move on to some questions then. We've got 15 minutes left, so maybe I'll just jump into a couple of the questions. Some of these actually we've sort of touched on in the discussion, so maybe we can give a brief answer and refer to any of the other points we've made. So, Justin, I think one for you here. What differentiates Boson from the other Web3 commerce solutions that are doing physical NFTs or redeemables and things like that?
Well, I think exactly as Mischa just said, the other solutions are not Web3. They are simply, you could give someone a little paper voucher and say, here you go, you can redeem this for a pair of sneakers. There are no strong guarantees. There's no, and so it's kind of Web3 washing, and we've got a big article coming out about that. And that's fine, because a lot of these first movers, there hasn't been an easy way to do. I mean, we've taken over 2 years to build a trust minimized Web3 commerce solution. But, what differentiates us is we're the only one that does real trust minimized decentralized commerce.
Yeah. And you might think that's relevant and interesting, for untrusted sellers. Why would it make a difference if, Adidas aren't going to, and Mischa just dropped out of them. It looks like Adidas or Nike aren't going to do me over if I buy a pair of digital sneakers on OpenSea. But I think, and he's back. I think there is a sort of a broader. So if this is a sort of socio-economic innovation, you need to enable things like, secondary sales. You need to enable things like that, genuine programmability and that sort of thing. And I think even from a brand perspective, in the same way that a couple of years ago people were selling NFTs that were basically links to an AWS server. Is that really an on-chain thing that's going to live forever? Probably not. Right? Is your physical or digital item that just refers to the promise that a company provides you, or is that really Web3? I don't know.
I think the audience is buying these items as they become increasingly sophisticated. There's just pointlessness of using an NFT for a non-Web3 type exchange, right? You may as well just use a digital file. So, the brand's point of view, that if you're going to do something, do it authentically and give the users all these hard benefits that you give them, the hard asset. They can then go and trade, and everybody knows that this asset is hard.
Yeah. And actually building on that one, Justin, the other one from the pre-questions, there's a lot of negative sentiment about Web3. In a way, it's become a bit of a toxic name for a lot of mainstream brands. Lufthansa and Starbucks are doing Web3 type projects. Starbucks working with Polygon, obviously, but they're not really mentioning NFTs. What do you think the impact of that is on the market? And does it help adoption even to sort of work in that sort of way?
Well, look, these things come in waves as well, but it's definitely time for us in Web3 to stand up for what Web3 is. And as you know, Matt, I'm going to be doing quite a bit of advocacy, in support of Web3 as being a liberty technology, right? Web3 is here to protect people, to protect their privacy, to ensure that they get what they paid for, and it's time we started standing up for that. Eric Voorhees at Permission List yesterday came out with some classic quotes. I'll just read off a couple. One is, "We've become farm animals. We graze, we produce, and we are harvested. Crypto is our rebellion against permission, and it's no less than a noble reclamation of dignity and grace as free and sovereign individuals in the service of peaceful civilization." Let me put it there. Look, crypto is about protecting us from all of these attacks on our privacy and sovereignty that modern digital society has come up with, and it's high time we started defending and standing behind that, and explaining exactly that this is a liberty tech.
One here, it's an easy question actually. What's our approach to sort of scaling Boson? Well, I think we sort of talked about that. I mean, it's sort of twofold in a way, right? Put it very, very simply, we're aiming to make the protocol progressively easier and more accessible to use through, right now, building no code, low code tools, and then next building simpler connections into making the tech more usable. So things like fiat on ramps, token swaps, some of that stuff that we were just talking about there, even a little bit like, if there are a segment of users who just want to buy stuff, right, then plugging into some of these sort of custodial wallet solutions, or basically account abstraction, if you want to use the sort of nerdy way of talking about it, that's okay, right? But then also that's our linear progress. That's our sort of like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 growth loop, if you like, and then our exponential growth loop is focused around plugging our tech into other tech, right? That gets us access to hundreds of thousands or millions of potential users, right? So things like plugging into these new renewable standards, looking at OpenSea, things like making Boson part of the product suite of other people's products, right? Like WooCommerce and like some others that are on the roadmap. That will over time sort of enable us to spread our tentacles into into the fabric of the web, which is the sort of stated strategy of the project. Become the TCP IP of commerce. Good. That was my speech. Thank you for listening to my TED talk. All right. What else have we got? Boson seems the perfect design for the tokenization of a commodity market. Commodity markets are forward contracts, where in the end physical goods are delivered. Sounds very close to what Boson has designed. Are there intentions to enter this market? That was from Phil. Thank you, Phil. Mischa, do you want to take that one?
Yeah. Thanks, Phil. I think you're spot on. When I geek out, the way I describe the protocol is a way to exchange off-chain promises with on-chain assets. And a commodities market would be exactly that. So what we've done with the base protocol is applicable for that use case. The suite of widgets and dApps which we've built for people to plug in, we've been kind of targeting physical commerce or trade, e-commerce, whatever you want to call it. So it would just be a matter of building another set of tools on top of the protocol to enable that type of market.
Yeah. And look, we have a number of conversations ongoing with different domains, from things like services, rentals, some commodities, etc., where people are, okay, well, maybe we can use your core exchange engine to do X. And yes, absolutely, that's an explicit part of the design of Boson. The set of tools we've built currently are focused on commerce, but the protocol itself could have those tools built from multiple different domains. It's deliberately generic and unopinionated. So yeah. Oh, you're on mute now.
Sorry, guys. Let's do a couple more from the pre-list, and then I know there have been some live questions from actual live attendees. So let's maybe jump over to that, just so people can't accuse us of pre-preparing everything. But Justin, maybe you want to sort of touch on a different sort of angle on that sort of, macro strategy. There are, like you mentioned, Larry Fink a minute ago, but finance giants like BlackRock, Fidelity, all entering this tokenization space. What do you think about how we differentiate ourselves and how we sort of maintain an edge in that market that's going to become increasingly crowded, both from a mind share and a product point of view?
Sure. I mean, I think there's two elements really. I mean, we could do get Mischa to do one of his famous 2x2s with centralized and decentralized, and commerce and finance, right? Almost all of these players are, centralized custodial solutions. So by that I mean, let's say I want to tokenize this mug. I just say, okay, here you go, IOU. Mischa, can you buy this IOU for the mug? I take Mischa's money, I give him an IOU, and Mischa can trust me that I'm going to give him the mug, right? That's how all of the other Web3 commerce systems work, is trusted. What's the point of using a blockchain for a trusted system? None. I mean, maybe transparency and kind of stuff like that, and likewise, a lot of the financial asset, but all of the financial assets are kind of like trusted. Somebody will take a shipment of gold bars, put them in their safe, issue you a piece of paper or a token, and you go and buy that token, and you trust that regulated entity is going to give you the gold bar, right? With Boson, we take a totally different approach. We use crypto economics. We're an algorithmic approach, right? So basically what happens is the blockchain locks up the funds and issues an NFT, and then the blockchain releases the funds if certain conditions are met that give a strong and credible guarantee that the seller has fulfilled their obligation to the buyer. So I guess across those two dimensions, we're differentiated. We're the only centralized solution, and we're in common as well. So I think that a lot of these projects, they're very different to us, but it's great that all together we're creating this zeitgeist and going to bring billions of funds into Web3. But we're in a very nice blue ocean around both.
And you partly answered Turt's question from InCrowdcast, so I thought I'd just sort of piggyback that on. I mean, I think so. So Turt, with sort of how a buyer or a seller can be sure that they'll receive the items, or the buyer can receive the items from the seller, is that crypto economic game, if you like, is such that when a buyer commits to an offer, they put the funds inside the smart contract, which issues the redeemable NFT, right? And then later, the bearer of that redeemable NFT can then arrange for delivery of the items. The seller does not receive the funds until such time as either the timeout has expired or the buyer has confirmed that they're happy, right? So in this way, and there is an escalated dispute resolution process in a very similar way to how Web2 organizations do it. But in our experience, in all transactions that happen, that's actually a minuscule fraction. Most transactions go through successfully. When there is a dispute, the two parties organize it between themselves, and then a small fraction go to escalated dispute. And in that way, the buyer can be sure that they'll either receive the item or their money back, right? And the seller also has assurance that that there is the a credible on-chain delivery of the value that the off-chain, off-chain item, the physical product will result in. Let's do one of these live ones. Let's freestyle it for a couple of minutes. How are you keeping transactions fees low within the Boson ecosystem? Sellers and buyers are interacting. I suppose maybe more broadly, talk about the transaction fees. I guess that touches on one of the other questions around token utility, and how we manage that part of the network.
Yeah. So the kind of theory behind protocols like Boson is that within this new Web3 economy, you're going to have certain functions that need to be performed. You could have IPFS for storage, and Ethereum for compute, and these various Uniswap for token exchanges, and that you will have these kind of protocol layers that will be what Crispin Nisket, placeholder VC, in a really great article calls minimally extractive coordinators. So the aim is to have, imagine if you had TCP/IP, so that every time you send data, there was a small fee taken by the protocol, just a tiny fee taken for every data exchange. That's the principle of Web3 protocols, as these minimally extractive coordinators. So the principle is to have a small fee on a massive number of transactions, and to become that single layer upon which all of these transactions happen. That's the business model. And the current fee for Boson is 0.5% transaction fee, unless things are transacted in Boson, in which case lots of Boson will get locked up, which will give the network additional benefits. And I'm happy to post that. I'll post that article here for anyone that wants to kind of geek out on it. There you go, one of my favorites.
Thanks, Justin. Okay, we've got time for maybe a couple more questions. Let's maybe...
The more we do, the fewer I have to do via DM.
As a seller on WooCommerce, how can we leverage Boson's planned staking pools, or is that only going to be for DApp sellers? That's a good question, but I don't actually know the answer to. Maybe Mischa, maybe you could you look at that? I'm not sure if I really understand it. I mean, maybe talk about this, the sort of...
I mean, it's an easy one, really. It's exactly the same. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Well, there's no different class of seller.
Yeah, and the DApp is transforming into this thing called the seller hub, where sellers will be able to always, regardless of where they're selling, always be able to go to the DApp and interact with the protocol and leverage any of its features.
Yeah, good one. Also, here's a good one. I know Lewis has got a kind of a thing about a disappointing transaction he had with a seller. Maybe we'll come back to that. But is there it was mentioned that the redeemable NFT can also be held over time and eventually redeemed or sold. Does the NFT have an expiration date, or how is it ensured that the merchant still owns the item after months or years and is able to ship it? So maybe talk about redeemable, validity, duration, how expiration works, and what happens if the seller doesn't deliver. I guess that's a compound question. Maybe.
So there are flexible periods for, like, the redemption period. There's a minimum that is set, but the seller can make that as long as they like, right? Within reason. I'm sure there's some limits. So that's the first thing. There's a flexibility there for sellers to configure. I think the second part of the question was, how does the buyer ensure that at the end of it, the seller will redeem the NFT. Well, what happens is the buyer's payment amount will get locked up into the protocol. And if at the end, when they go to redeem, the seller doesn't redeem, then they will get their money back. That's the core guarantee of Boson. But in addition, there is this kind of optional seller deposit. Now, it's up to the seller to provide that. And if I were to be going and buying, you know, from a trusted seller that I really trusted, I probably wouldn't need a seller deposit in there, right? I'd trust their brand, you know, whatever. But if it's a non-trusted, if it's a less trusted seller, or if the time frame is quite long, then there can be a seller deposit there. And if the seller doesn't deliver the product as agreed, then they would forfeit that, right? So so Boson, and it's all in the white paper, and maybe we'll do a deep dive on the kind of crypto economics and all the rules and stuff. But there are these configurable deposits on buyer and seller that penalize either the buyer or the seller for backing out or failing to deliver. Yeah, but they're optional, so the transactions can be completely reversible, and then you go and put your money in knowing there's no guarantee you'll get the item, but you'll always get your money back. Or some things where you're like, oh, okay, the seller's got like a $50 deposit here, they're gonna deliver, and you can be a bit more confident.
We can't hear you, Matt.
Sorry about that. As you're saying, we are up on time, and I know we have got maybe only a third of the way through the questions, but maybe we should call it a day there. And some good themes here around sort of details about how it works, sort of like the economic model behind underpinning. Might be that we need to arrange a follow-up session and do a bit of a deep dive on some of that stuff.
Well, maybe we can work on getting the answers for some of these questions and sticking them on our socials as well.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks
very much.
DM.
Yeah. Any problems anyone has anywhere, just please send Justin Banon on Telegram a message. He's always available 24/7.
I already do Twitter anyways.
Okay. Thanks for joining, everyone, and see you again next time. Thanks so much.